The dark vastness of space wrapped around the human stealth ship like a blanket. Inside the vessel's cramped command center, Lieutenant James Marshall checked his combat suit's seals one final time. His fingers moved with practiced ease across the reinforced fabric and metal joints. Around him, his 5-person rescue team did the same, their movements quick and silent. Target vessel approaching, the ship's AI announced in a soft voice. Dominion slave transport detected. Class 3 security systems active. James moved to the view screen, his green eyes narrowing at the sight of the massive transport ship. Its hull was painted in the sickly purple colors of the Dominion, the alien empire that had been humanity's enemy for the past 3 years. The ship's design was ugly and practical, like everything the Dominion built. A giant box pushing through space, carrying its cargo of misery. "Remember the mission," James said to his team. "We get in, free our people, and get out. No heroics. No delays." He didn't need to say more. They had all lost friends and family to the Dominion's slave raids. The team's ship moved silently into position beneath the transport's belly, special magnets activated, pulling them against the larger vessel's hull with a soft thump. James led the way through their airlock, and they began cutting through the transport's outer shell with plasma torches. The break-in went smoothly, too smoothly. James felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise as they moved through empty corridors. Either their intel was wrong, or this was a trap. They found the prisoner cells exactly where their maps showed they would be. Rows of energy barriers hummed with blue light, containing perhaps 50 human captives. James's team moved quickly, using stolen codes to deactivate the cells. The prisoners were weak but able to walk, their faces showing mixture of hope and fear. "There's another cell block," one of the freed prisoners whispered. "Down that corridor. They keep the special ones there." James knew they should stick to the plan. Get the rescued humans to safety. Don't take unnecessary risks. But something made him pause. "Tom, start the evacuation. I'll check the other block." The special containment area was different. Instead of simple energy barriers, these cells had complex containment fields and strange devices attached to their walls. Most were empty, but in the last cell, James saw something that made him stop in his tracks. A female figure floated in a column of light. Her skin seemed to be made of living crystal, shifting with rainbow colors that danced across its surface. Her eyes were closed, long silver hair floating around her face as if she was suspended in water. She wore simple white clothing that seemed to shimmer with the same crystalline quality as her skin. James had never seen anything like her. He knew of the stellar race. Everyone did. They were supposed to be extinct, wiped out by the Dominion decades ago. Their civilization had been one of the oldest and most advanced in the galaxy before their fall. Yet here was one, alive and imprisoned. The control panel showed warning after warning. The containment field was specifically designed to hold her, dampening whatever powers her kind possessed. James knew the smart thing would be to leave her. She wasn't part of the mission. She wasn't human. She could be dangerous. A small moan escaped her lips, and her eyes fluttered open. They were pure silver, like liquid moonlight. She looked at James with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. He remembered why he had joined the rescue teams in the first place, not just to save humans, but to fight against everything the Dominion stood for. Their cruelty, their slavery, their belief that they could own other thinking beings. His fingers flew across the control panel, shutting down the containment field. The crystalline woman fell forward, and he caught her. She was surprisingly light in his arms, her skin cool to the touch even through his suit. "I've got you," he said softly. "You're safe now." An alarm began to blare through the ship. They had overstayed their welcome. James activated his comm unit. "Tom, we've got one more. Meeting you at the extraction point." As he carried the crystalline woman through the corridors, her silver eyes stayed fixed on his face. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment would change not just their lives, but the course of the entire war. The escape back to their ship was chaos. James ran through the flashing red emergency lights, the crystalline woman still in his arms. Behind them, the sound of Dominion security boots echoed through the metal corridors. "Almost there," he said, more to himself than to her. The woman hadn't spoken a word since her rescue, but her silver eyes watched everything with sharp intelligence. A blast of energy hit the wall next to them, leaving a smoking hole in the metal. James ducked behind a corner, carefully setting the woman down. "Can you run?" he asked. She stood shakily, then nodded. Her movement was graceful despite her weakness, like a dancer finding her rhythm again. When she spoke, her voice was musical, but rough from lack of use. "I can run." They sprinted the last stretch to the rescue ship's entry point. Tom was waiting there, helping the last of the human prisoners inside. His eyes widened at the sight of the crystalline woman, but he said nothing, just waved them in. The ship detached from the transport's hull just as more Dominion troops arrived. Their small vessel shook with weapons fire, but the shields held. Within minutes, they were racing through space, the transport falling behind. In the ship's medical bay, James helped the crystalline woman sit on an examination table. The other rescued prisoners watched her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Her skin continued to shift with rainbow colors under the bright lights. "I am Arya," she said suddenly, looking at James. "And you are either very brave or very foolish to have rescued me." James smiled slightly. "Lieutenant James Marshall, and maybe I'm a bit of both." "The Dominion will hunt us now," she said. "Me especially. I was a royal scholar of my people before they came." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. James pulled up a chair and sat near her, but not too close. He could see the trauma of captivity in her eyes, in the way she held herself ready to flee at any moment. "How long were you their prisoner?" Time was difficult to track in that cell, but I believe it was 3 of your Earth years. She looked down at her crystalline hands. "They kept me alive because I refused to give them what they wanted. Knowledge of the ancient weapons my people once built. Weapons that could have stopped them if we had only used them in time." A commotion at the medical bay door interrupted them. Captain Rogers, the mission commander, burst in. His face was red with anger. "Marshal, what were you thinking? The mission parameters were clear: rescue human prisoners only." James stood, placing himself between the captain and Arya. "Sir, she's a survivor of the stellar race. You know what that means. The intelligence she has could be a trap." Rogers cut him off. "The stellar race is dead. This could be a Dominion trick. We need to confine her until—" "No." James's voice was quiet but firm. "She's a refugee, not a prisoner. And if you put her in another cell, I'll resign my commission right now." The medical bay fell silent. Everyone knew James's record. Decorated 3 times for bravery, 8 successful rescue missions. Roger's face worked through several shades of red before settling into a scowl. "She's your responsibility," he snapped finally. "If anything happens, it's on your head." He stormed out. James turned back to Arya, expecting to see fear or worry on her face. Instead, she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Her silver eyes seemed to glow slightly. "You would risk your position to protect me?" she asked softly. "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do," James said simply, "and because I think you might be the key to finally stopping the Dominion. But first, you need to rest and heal. We can talk more later." Arya nodded slowly. For the first time, a small smile crossed her crystalline features. "Perhaps," she said, "you are neither brave nor foolish, James Marshall. Perhaps you are simply human. And that might be exactly what this galaxy needs." The volcanic moon looked dead from space. Black rocks and rivers of lava covered its surface, while thick clouds of ash filled its sky. It was the perfect hiding place for the human resistance's secret base. 3 days had passed since the rescue. James watched as their ship descended through the ash clouds toward a hidden landing pad carved into the side of an extinct volcano. Beside him, Arya stood at the window, her crystalline skin reflecting the red glow of the lava flows below. "Your people are clever," she said. "The Dominion would never think to look here. Their bodies cannot handle such extreme environments." "That's why we chose it," James replied. "Though the environmental suits get uncomfortable after a while." The ship landed smoothly in a large cave. As the dust settled, James noticed Arya's hands trembling slightly. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Not of the base," she said quietly. "But I haven't been around so many people since before my capture." James moved closer, careful to telegraph his movements. "I'll stay with you. No one will hurt you here." The main base was a marvel of engineering, carved deep into the volcano's core. Cooling systems kept the temperature comfortable, while thick walls protected against the harsh environment outside. As James led Arya through the corridors, other resistance fighters stopped to stare at her crystalline form. They reached the command center, where General Reed was waiting. The old soldier's face was a map of scars from years of fighting. He studied Arya with sharp eyes. "So," he said, "you're our mysterious stellar survivor." Captain Rogers has been quite vocal about his concerns. "General," James started, but Reed held up a hand. "Let her speak, Lieutenant." Arya stepped forward, her silver eyes meeting the general's gaze. "Your people saved me from a fate worse than death. In return, I offer knowledge that could change the course of this war." She raised her hands, and suddenly the air above them filled with light. A hologram appeared, showing complex technical diagrams that James didn't understand. "These are the defense systems my people built," Arya explained. "The Dominion hunted us because they feared this technology. Not weapons of destruction, but shields that could protect entire worlds." The general leaned forward, his eyes wide. "You can remember all this. After 3 years of captivity." "My people's minds do not work like yours," Arya said. "Our memories are stored in our crystalline structure. They cannot be erased or corrupted. The Dominion tried, but they never understood how we truly function." A commotion at the door interrupted them. Captain Rogers burst in with 2 armed guards. "General, we can't trust her. Any technology she gives us could be sabotage. We should." "That's enough, Captain." Reed's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I've reviewed Lieutenant Marshall's report, and I've made my decision." He turned to Arya. "We would be honored to have your help, but you should know, some of what we'll ask you to do might go against your people's peaceful ways." Arya's skin flickered with deep blue patterns, an expression of sadness James had learned. "My people's dedication to peace died with them, General. I am the last, and I choose to fight." James felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by concern as he saw Arya sway slightly on her feet. The hologram flickered out. "She needs rest," he said firmly. "The escape and her injuries are still affecting her." General Reed nodded. "Get her settled in. We'll begin work tomorrow." He glared at Rogers. "And Captain, if I hear any more talk of prisoners or confinement, you'll be on lava tube cleaning duty for a month." As James led Arya to her quarters, she spoke softly. "Your general is a good man. He reminds me of my father, able to see beyond appearances to what matters." "What does matter?" James asked. Arya stopped walking and turned to face him. In the base's artificial light, her crystalline skin shimmered like starlight on water. "Hope," she said simply. "Something I had lost until you found me. And now, perhaps, something we can give to others." James looked at her, seeing not just her alien beauty but the strength within. Together, they might just have a chance to change everything. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. 2 weeks passed quickly in the volcanic base. Arya worked with the resistance engineers, sharing her knowledge of stellar shield technology. James stayed close, watching her grow stronger each day. Her crystalline skin now shone with a healthy glow, and she moved with increasing confidence through the base's corridors. Late one night, James found her alone in the engineering lab, surrounded by floating holograms of complex machines. "You should rest," he said, offering her a cup of water. Arya took the cup, her fingers brushing his. A small spark jumped between them, making both pause. "Thank you," she said softly, "but there's so much to do. The basic shield designs are almost ready." James sat beside her, watching the play of colors across her skin. He had learned to read her emotions in these shifts. Right now, the soft pink meant she was happy, despite her exhaustion. "You've given us more hope in 2 weeks than we've had in years," he said. Arya turned to face him, her silver eyes serious. "James, there's something I need to tell you. My people, we have laws about relationships with non-crystalline beings. Laws that—" A sudden explosion rocked the base, cutting off her words. Emergency alarms began blaring throughout the complex. "Warning! Warning! Dominion forces detected. All personnel to battle stations." James grabbed his communicator. "This is impossible. Our security is too good. They couldn't have found us unless—" "Unless someone told them," Arya finished. Her skin had turned a dark, stormy gray. They ran to the command center. General Reed was already there, barking orders. On the main screen, they could see Dominion ships descending through the ash clouds. "How did they find us?" James demanded. "They had help," Reed growled, pointing to a corner of the room. Captain Rogers stood there, held at gunpoint by security officers. His face showed no shame, only cold determination. "The alien witch has corrupted you all," Rogers spat. "The Dominion promised to spare human lives if we handed her over. It was the only way." James moved toward Rogers, his fists clenched, but Arya's cool hand on his arm stopped him. "We don't have time," she said. "The base must be evacuated." She was right. The first explosions were already hitting the outer defenses. Reed ordered the evacuation to begin, sending people toward the emergency tunnels. As they ran through the chaos, Arya suddenly stopped. "The shield designs. They're still in the lab computer." "Leave them." James pulled at her arm. "No. If the Dominion gets them, they'll know exactly how to counter them. I have to delete everything." They changed direction, running back toward the lab. The base shook with more impacts, and parts of the ceiling began to cave in. They reached the lab just as a group of Dominion soldiers blasted through a nearby wall. "Keep them back," Arya shouted, rushing to the computers. "I need 1 minute." James took position at the door, his weapon ready. The first Dominion soldier that appeared went down with a precise shot. More followed. James fired again and again, but they kept coming. Then he heard it. Arya's scream of pain. He turned to see her clutching her arm, where a stray shot had hit her. But her other hand was still on the computer, her crystalline skin glowing bright as she interfaced directly with the system. "Done," she cried. "Everything's wiped." James ran to her, supporting her as they fled toward the escape tunnels. Behind them, more explosions rocked the base. They could hear the Dominion troops in pursuit. "You're hurt," he said, seeing the damage to her crystalline form. "I'll heal," she gasped. "But James, what I was trying to tell you before, about my people's laws." "Tell me later," he said, "when we're safe." But as they ran, James couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship had reached a turning point. Whatever Arya had been about to say, whatever laws her people had, nothing could be the same after tonight. The betrayal had changed everything. Except, perhaps, what was growing between them. The escape tunnels led deep under the volcanic moon's surface. James, Arya, and 30 surviving resistance fighters emerged in a hidden canyon 5 miles from the base. Above them, they could see Dominion ships still bombing their former home. "All that work, lost," one of the engineers said sadly. "Not everything," Arya replied. Her injured arm was healing slowly, the crystalline surface gradually repairing itself. "I managed to save the most important data here." She tapped her temple with her good hand. General Reed approached them, his face covered in ash, but his eyes still sharp. "We have a fallback position in the mountains. But first, Area, you mentioned something about an ancient temple. She nodded, her skin shifting to a deep purple of determination. Yes. What the Dominion doesn't know is that the shield designs were only part of the truth. There's something much more powerful hidden on this moon. On this moon? James asked in surprise. How? My people built temples throughout the galaxy thousands of years ago, Area explained. Places to store our greatest achievements. I sensed one nearby as soon as we landed. That's why I wanted to work here specifically. Reed looked skeptical. And you're just telling us this now? I had to be sure I could trust everyone, Area said, glancing at James. After what happened with Rogers, you can understand why. Using a small crystal from her necklace, Area projected a map into the air. It showed a complex structure buried deep within one of the largest volcanoes. The temple contains the original shield generator, she said. Not just designs, but a working prototype. One powerful enough to protect this entire sector of space. The surviving fighters gathered around the hologram, hope beginning to replace their despair. But there's a catch, isn't there? James asked quietly. Area's skin rippled with waves of blue. Yes, the temple's defenses will only recognize stellar biology. I have to go alone. No, James's response was immediate. We just saw what the Dominion is willing to do to get to you. You're not going alone. He's right, Reed added. We'll send a small team. The rest of us will head to the fallback position and try to draw the Dominion's attention away. 2 hours later, James found himself climbing a narrow volcanic tube with Area and 3 other fighters. The heat was intense, even through their environmental suits. Area seemed unbothered by it. Her crystalline form actually appeared to be absorbing and refracting the heat. My ancestors chose this place well, she said as they climbed. The extreme conditions are perfect for storing our technology. The heat powers it, and the magnetic fields protect it. They reached a smooth wall that looked different from the natural rock around it. Area placed her hand against it, and lines of light spread out from her touch. A doorway appeared, opening into darkness. Inside, the temple was beautiful and alien. Crystal columns rose into darkness above them, and the walls were covered in flowing script that glowed faintly. It's still active, Area breathed in wonder. After all these centuries, she led them to a central chamber where a massive crystal structure hung from the ceiling. It looked like a giant version of Area's own crystalline form. This is it, she said. The original shield generator. The one thing the Dominion truly fears. Why? James asked. What makes it so special? Because it doesn't just defend, Area replied, her voice filled with emotion. It adapts. It learns. Once activated, it can protect against any weapon the Dominion creates. They killed my people because they knew this technology would make their empire impossible. She reached up toward the crystal structure, her skin beginning to glow brightly. And now, after all this time, we're going to finish what my ancestors started. But before she could touch the crystal, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. I'm afraid I can't let you do that. They turned to see Captain Rogers standing in the doorway, holding a Dominion weapon, his environmental suit marked with their purple colors. Behind him, more Dominion troops were filing into the temple. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out where you were going? He asked, smiling coldly. Everything happened at once. James dove behind a crystal column as Dominion weapons fire filled the ancient chamber with deadly light. The 3 resistance fighters with them scattered, taking cover where they could. Area, get to the shield generator, James shouted, returning fire at Rogers and his Dominion allies. We'll hold them off. Area ran toward the massive crystal structure hanging from the ceiling, her skin glowing brighter with each step. Rogers saw what she was doing and snarled. Stop her. The Dominion wants that technology intact. More troops poured into the temple chamber. One of the resistance fighters fell, his environmental suit burning from a direct hit. Another took a shot to the leg but kept fighting. James watched Area's progress while he fought. She had reached the base of the crystal structure and was beginning to climb, her own crystalline form seeming to resonate with the ancient technology. Light pulsed between her and the device with increasing intensity. A blast hit James's shoulder, spinning him around. His suit's integrity was compromised, and he could feel the volcanic heat seeping in. He gritted his teeth and kept shooting, determined to give Arya the time she needed. "You're all fools," Rogers shouted over the chaos. "The Dominion is unstoppable. Better to submit than to die uselessly." "Is that what you told yourself when you betrayed us?" James called back, his voice heavy with disgust. "Did it help you sleep at night?" More resistance fighters fell. James was running out of ammunition. Above them, Arya had almost reached the central core of the shield generator. Her entire body was glowing now, like a star brought down to the temple floor. Then disaster struck. A lucky shot from a Dominion weapon hit the crystal structure near Arya. She lost her grip and fell, hitting the ground hard. Her crystalline form cracked in several places, and she cried out in pain. "No," James broke from cover, running to her. Dominion fire followed him, but somehow he made it to her side. "Arya, can you stand?" "James." Her voice was weak, her silver eyes flickering. "The generator. I have to reach it." "You can barely move." He tried to help her up, but more weapons fire forced them back down. Rogers approached, keeping his distance but training his weapon on them. "Such a waste," he said. "You could have been part of something greater, Marshal. Instead, you'll die here with this alien freak." James held Arya close, shielding her with his body as best he could. He could feel the heat from her cracked crystalline form, could see the pain in her silver eyes. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that he loved her, no matter what laws her people might have. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her. "I couldn't protect you." Arya's hand touched his face. Her skin was hot now, almost burning. "No, James, you did something much more important." Her voice grew stronger. "You showed me that love can exist even between different worlds." Suddenly, her entire body flared with blinding light. James felt energy pour from her into him, and his wounds began to heal. More than that, his skin began to change, taking on a slight crystalline sheen. What are you doing?" he gasped. "Breaking my people's final law," she said. "The bond of healing is sacred, meant only for life mates. It changes both people forever." Her eyes met his. "I choose you, James Marshall. Now, help me finish this." Together, they stood. James felt strength flowing through him like nothing he'd ever experienced. Rogers and the Dominion troops opened fire, but the energy surrounding James and Arya deflected their shots. With their hands linked, they reached up toward the shield generator. Their combined power called to the ancient device, and above them, the massive crystal structure began to pulse with answering light. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance as two hearts, now bound forever, reached for victory. The ancient temple chamber filled with blinding light as James and Arya's combined power reached the shield generator. The massive crystal structure above them pulsed with energy, each beat sending waves of force through the volcanic complex. "Impossible," Rogers screamed, firing his weapon uselessly. The shots dissipated in the energy field surrounding James and Arya. James could feel the changes in his body accelerating. His skin had taken on a subtle crystalline sheen, and he could sense Arya's thoughts and emotions flowing through their newfound bond. Her love, her determination, and her hope wrapped around him like a warm blanket. "The generator is accepting our connection," Arya said, her silver eyes bright with joy. "Your humanity combined with my stellar nature. It's exactly what was needed. Two peoples becoming one." The Dominion troops began to retreat in panic as the temple's crystal columns came alive with power. Rogers stood his ground, firing desperately at the shield generator. "You don't understand what you're doing," he shouted. "The Dominion brings order to chaos. Without them, the galaxy will fall into anarchy." "No," James replied, his voice resonating with new power. "The galaxy will be free." The shield generator unleashed its energy in a massive pulse that spread outward from the temple. James and Arya watched through their shared vision as the wave of power expanded into space, covering the entire volcanic moon in seconds. Dominion ships in orbit suddenly lost power, their weapons systems going dark. The shield technology didn't destroy them. Instead, it simply made their weapons useless, protecting everything within its range. "It's beautiful," Arya whispered, watching through their bond as the shield continued to spread, jumping from planet to planet, moon to moon, creating a network of protection throughout the sector. Rogers fell to his knees, his weapon dead in his hands. The remaining Dominion troops fled the temple in disorder. Outside, they could hear the sounds of resistance fighters, cheering as word of the shield's success spread. General Reed's voice crackled over their communicators. "Whatever you two did, it worked. Dominion forces are retreating across the entire sector. Their weapons just stopped working." James held Arya close, marveling at how natural it felt now that they were bonded. "Are you okay? The changes in me. Is this what you meant about life mates?" Arya touched his face gently, her crystalline fingers tracing the subtle shimmer in his skin. "The healing bond is changing you, yes. Not fully into my kind, but into something new. Something between our peoples." She smiled, "Just as I hoped it would." "You planned this." "I hoped," she corrected. "When I first saw you, I sensed something special in you. Something that might be compatible with our way of being. But the choice had to be yours as well." The remaining resistance fighters entered the temple chamber, securing Rogers and helping their wounded. James and Arya stood before the still glowing shield generator, its power now flowing steadily outward to maintain the protective network. "What happens now?" James asked, both to Arya and to the universe at large. "Now," she said, "we teach others. The shield network will need both humans and stellars to maintain it. More bonds will need to be formed." She looked at him hopefully. "If you're willing to help me show the way." James answered by pulling her into a kiss. The energy field around them sparkled with joy, and their combined crystalline glow lit the ancient chamber like starlight. In the days that followed, the Dominion was forced to begin peace negotiations. Without their weapons advantage, their empire began to crumble. Other alien races, inspired by the cooperation between humans and the last stellar, started to unite against their former oppressors. And in a temple deep beneath a volcanic moon, two beings who had dared to love across the boundaries of species began planning for a future where such boundaries no longer existed. Their story would be told for generations, the human soldier and the alien slave who found each other amid chaos and changed the galaxy forever. As James and Arya worked to teach others about the shield technology and the possibility of bonds between peoples, they never forgot that first moment in the slave ship when he had promised to keep her safe. Some promises, it seemed, had a way of growing into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. The end.